The Sheriff's Outcast Bride by Margaret Tanner. Chapter 1, South Dakota, 1870s. God damn it, Ryan, that gal's no good. You're the sheriff, do something about it, Von Mulligan shouted. Becky Tucker hasn't broken any laws that I know of. What in tarnation do you want me to do about it, Pa? Your brother's been sniffing around her for years, but lately he's been talking about courting her. The veins on the old man's neck bulged. It wasn't good for a man with heart problems to get so enraged. He's a grown man, old enough to make his own decisions. Ryan thrust his fingers through his hair. His father was driving him loco with this vendetta against the Tucker gal. It isn't her fault that her crooked father swindled you. The mother was a decent enough woman, or Wes Carstairs wouldn't have gotten hitched to her. He needed a mother for Lucinda. A sudden sly gleam lit up the old man's eyes. She's back, you know. Ryan gave an exasperated snort. Who? He knew who his father meant. Lucinda Carstairs was a spoiled brat who had taken a fancy to him one of her intermittent trips from some exclusive girls' school in Boston. Hell, she was only 19. Even if he was thinking of getting hitched, which he wasn't, it certainly wouldn't have been to a gal like her, even if she was the heir to a prosperous ranch and several businesses in town. He didn't plan on being sheriff for the rest of his life. He had dreams of buying his own spread one day, but he wasn't prepared to wed Lucinda to get it. His father stomping up and down brought him back to the matter at hand. I'll speak to Jace about it, but that's the best I can do. He won't listen, Vaughn snarled. He's letting that whore lead him around what's between his legs. Brian gritted his teeth to stop an angry retort springing to his lips. Pa always turned crude and nasty after a few drinks, and he had more than a few drinks. He reeked of whiskey. Go home, Pa. He gave a weary sigh. It was hell being an older brother to Jace, always having to clean up after his messes. Lazy, overindulged, and now the owner of the Mulligan ranch. The unfairness of it all. Bitterness ate into him, raw, ferocious like a starving dog on a piece of meat. I ought to leave Blackwood and never return. Even though he had been born here, he had spent most of his time on the trail as a bounty hunter and gunslinger. The place meant little to him now. Montana or Wyoming appealed to him. He had only returned here to help his father, naturally expecting to eventually share the ranch with Jace. He would have given his brother a fair price for the share. Ranching held no appeal to Jace, too much like hard work, but while the old man was able to organize the cowhands to keep the place running, Jace didn't have to worry over much. He just did the bare minimum. Are you gonna do something? The old man pushed his face up close and glared at him through bloodshot eyes. Had it been anyone else but his father, he would have swung a punch and knocked him to the ground. Go home. Brian ground the words out. I'll see what I can do. He watched his father stomp out of the office, banging the door behind him. With a muttered curse, he picked up a bundle of wanted posters and flicked through them. I don't want to go to this church shindig, Becky said. Aw, come on. It'll give me a chance to hold you in my arms. Jace gave one of his devastating smiles, and she couldn't resist him. All right, will you come over and escort me? He gnawed his lip. Can't. Have to bring your father along. Ryan is unlikely to come. He avoids social gatherings like the plague. You can go with Wes. Pa said he was going. I suppose Wes would go because of Lucinda. She wouldn't want to miss out on something social. Ranch life bores her. So she's back, Jace said. Yeah, she graduated from Boston Ladies Academy. Why would a Western gal want to go to a place like that? They stood near the creek, hidden from prying eyes by the trees. Jace took her into his arms and his kisses were hot and fierce. She returned his kisses, desperate to let him know how much she loved him. Only when his hand wandered to her breast did she break the embrace. No, Jace, please. She stepped back a pace. Oh, come on. I'm crazy for you, Becky. Don't deny me. I can't. If you really loved me, you would. There was a silky droop in his lips. That's not right. We'd only be anticipating our wedding by a few weeks. No one would know. He grabbed her around the waist and slammed her body against his. He eased the pressure a little so he could slide his hand between them. Becky gasped in shock when he fumbled with the buttons on her gown. No! She wiggled and squirmed until she twisted out of his embrace. You're treating me like a whore. God damn it, Becky. When a man is in love, it's natural for him to want his woman. I can't, not without a wedding ring. What if you gave me child? Wes would kill me. Hell and damnation. He stepped back. Can't conceive, not when it's your first time. He stared into her face, his eyes blazing. It would be your first time, wouldn't it? She felt like he had thrust a dagger into her heart, and hot tears burned the back of her eyes. She blinked them back, because ever since her mother had died, showing emotion was a luxury she could not afford. "Surely you don't believe those lies," she whispered, her voice distraught with the pain and disappointment because he had obviously listened to all the vicious gossip. He knew her better than anyone, and should have known the accusations weren't true. "No, I don't believe them." His denial came too late. Her shoulders slumped. "I better get back to the house. I've got some chores to do." "I'm sorry." He kissed her trembling lips. "When he's aroused, a man says things he doesn't mean. Please come to the dance. It'll be a chance to show everyone that we're courting." They stayed there chatting, planning their future together. It would be hard sharing a house with a man like Von Mulligan, but being Jace's wife would afford her protection. "Once Pa passes, we'll sell the ranch," Jace said. Arm in arm, they strolled back to the ranch house. She was glad Lucinda hadn't put in an appearance. "Until Saturday, sweet girl." Jace put on his Stetson, mounted his horse, and rode off. Slowly, thoughtfully, Becky walked inside. "Where the hell have you been?" Wes heaved himself out of his favorite armchair in the parlor and lumbered toward her. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. "I've been waiting 20 minutes for supper, while you've been whoring yourself to Jason Mulligan. He won't marry you. No man will. I won't support any bastard that you birth. Now get out to the kitchen." He cuffed her across the back of the head as she turned to flee. He was getting angrier and much more violent toward her since Lucinda had arrived home. Luckily, she had made a rich beef stew yesterday, and there was plenty left over. It was only a matter of heating it up and adding a few extra herbs to give it a different flavor. The fire still burned in the stove, but she tossed on a couple of logs for good measure. If it wasn't for the fact that she did so much work inside and outside of the house, he would banish her. She held no illusions about that. He had made the proposition quite clear after the episode with Von Mulligan, but she wouldn't think about that. It was too painful. If Jace married her, they could eventually leave town. He had always hated ranch life. "Supper is ready," she called out. Unless they had visitors, they always ate in the kitchen. Wes stomped in and sat at the table, taking the plate of food she handed him without a word. Lucinda drifted into the kitchen looking pale and big-eyed. She wore a nightgown and had a lacy shawl draped over her shoulders. "How do you feel, Angel?" Wes asked. Pa, my head aches so badly, it makes me feel ill." "Can't you give her something for the pain?" He glared at Becky. "Why don't you lie down on the sofa, and I'll rub your forehead with lavender oil. That might help," Becky said, ignoring Wes. For the last few years, Lucinda had been plagued with terrible headaches that sometimes lasted a couple of days. "Hurry up," she whimpered. "My head feels like it's going to split open." Becky dashed into the kitchen dresser to get a bottle of lavender oil and a clean cloth. Her food was getting cold, but when Lucinda wanted anything, she got it straight away. "Do you want anything to eat, Angel?" "No." She glanced at the table where Becky's plate sat. A cup of warm milk would be soothing. By the time Becky had attended to Lucinda's needs, made coffee for Wes, her meal was stone cold. She shoveled it into her mouth rather than receive a lecture on wasting the food he had so generously provided. "Nothing more than a slave. I have to get away from here. Please, God," she inwardly prayed. "Let me marry Jace soon, so he can take me away from this drudgery." He didn't like the town of Blackwood any more than she did. Perhaps she should have let him have his way with her, but she was too scared of the ramifications. She bit back a bitter laugh. Many of the townfolk thought she had already given herself to men. Mrs. Ferguson, the bank manager's wife, had once told her in front of a store full of people that she should go and work at the saloon like the other fallen doves. "Just because Eddie Tucker was my father doesn't mean I'm no good like him. Ma was a good woman and everyone seemed to like her. It's Vaughn's and Wes's fault that my reputation is ruined." "I can't see you anymore." "But why, Jace?" Becky stared at his handsome face. Tears trickled down her cheeks. "I thought we were courting," she whispered, her voice husky with shock and hurt. "There was nothing official between us," he said with brutal detachment. You mentioned marriage." "Yeah, well, that was only to get you to open your legs for me." Becky rocked back on her heels at his crude language. She couldn't believe the way he had spoken to her. They had known each other since their school days. She had always thought he was a friend, a future husband, even if his father was a revolting pig. He had never condemned her like most of the other townfolk. What had happened to change him? Lucinda. For as long as she could remember, if she had something and Lucinda wanted it, she got it. It hadn't been so bad when her mother had been alive, but once she died, West turned on her, becoming abusive, treating her like a slave, particularly after the battle with Von Mulligan. After Mrs. Parsons, their housekeeper, died, she had taken over all the household chores and also helped out on the ranch on busy times to save money. West didn't mind paying for Lucinda to attend exclusive girls' academy in Boston. Now that she was home, she swaned around the house doing nothing except making extra work. "It's Lucinda, isn't it?" Becky waited, hoping he would deny it. "All right, I think I've fallen in love with her." She flinched. "You only spoke to her in town yesterday." "I know, but it was love at first sight." A spasm of irritation crossed his face. "Don't cause any trouble, Becky, or I'll spread the word around Blackwood that you're a good roll in the hay." "You wouldn't dare." She stood there with her hands on her hips and stared him down, even though she inwardly cringed. "Try me." "We never did anything." "You and I know that." He gave a cruel, mocking laugh. "But no one else does." He swung on his heel and strode toward the ranch house while she wrapped her arms around a tree to stop from falling into a screaming heap on the ground. He had promised to take her away from Blackwood in this life of drudgery. She couldn't leave the ranch without him. She had no money, nowhere to go. Spoiled, beautiful Lucinda. What man could resist those baby blue eyes and blonde curls? It would be a perfect match, two adjoining ranches becoming one, two of the oldest families in the district united by the holy wedlock of their children. Despair rose up in her throat until she nearly choked on it. If she hadn't been so busy with household chores, she would have ridden into town to escape the confines of the ranch. Couldn't let West or Lucinda wait on their supper, though. If Jace decided to stay, she would have to provide for him also. Having to share a table with him would be painful after his ugly words. She would endure it, bury her hurt and resentment deep inside like she always did. Her father had been a no-good drunken swindler, but she wasn't like him. Why couldn't people believe that? She pounded her fist against the tree trunk. Why couldn't they believe she was a good person? West fostered the townfolk's dislike for her because it suited his purpose. Saved him money, ostracized, virtually friendless now that Amy and Steve were gone. He and Von Mulligan made sure it stayed that way. Don't think about Von and West's terrible deed, she shuddered, clamping down on the bitter incident that had ruined her life and broken her trust in men. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and would like to hear more, please hit the like and subscribe button. If you so happen to find yourself with your own published book and would like to submit your first chapter for a free audio cover, just email me at ebonyclock@yahoo.com with your first chapter, book cover, genre, and a brief synopsis of your book. See you next time on Ebony Clock Promotions.